Week 4 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few running backs I look to get on the wire this week. The first guy, Khalil Herbert of the Chicago Bears, said David Montgomery, he left this ball game early, but the reports are coming out he's day-to-day. And the Bears don't think it's as serious as they thought it was initially. But either healthy or not, Khalil Herbert's definitely going to get a workload here for this Bear team. We saw last season he showed flashes and had some good ball games when Montgomery was out for multiple weeks. And so far in the early going this season here, he's looked pretty decent. Week 1 versus San Francisco, 9 carries, 42 yards, a rush touchdown, a catch -2 yards. Week 2 at Green Bay, only 4 carries, 38 yards, a catch for 3 yards. But right here, Week 3 versus Houston, a monster ball game. Montgomery went down 20 carries, 157 rush yards, a touchdown, 2 rush touchdowns, 2 catches, 12 yards. So right there, that's a big ball game. Week 4, pretty decent matchup at the New York Giants here for Khalil Herbert. And right now, he's a guy that you definitely could have as flex consideration. And if Montgomery does miss a few weeks here, he'll be the top pickup on waiver wise, available in just a little bit over 50% of fantasy leagues here. So Khalil Herbert, the number 1 guy to get this week. If news does drop that Montgomery's not day-to-day and he'll miss a few weeks. The next guy's Alexander Madison of the Minnesota Vikings. So reports are coming out that Dalvin Cook should be good as well and be fine for the Week 4 ball game. Dalvin Cook so far this season, he hasn't put up those big numbers. Like, he was drafted as a first-round pick in the top 7 in most fantasy leagues. So Alexander Madison, we know he's good for a couple games a season, as Cooks had injury-prone seasons in his career. And Madison came in and he played good. 7 carries, 28 yards, a touchdown, a catch for 16 yards versus the Lions in Week 3. So Week 4, for some reason, if you don't go in the London game, here's Dalvin Cook. Alexander Madison's a solid start, and he'll be a guy probably ranked at running back in the top 15, and definitely a number 2 running back next week. So Madison, he's not available in many fantasy leagues. A lot of owners drafted him this season. They know he's one of the best running backs in handcuffs in the league. And Dalvin Cook, he's just been injury prone. So right now, he's only available in over 45% of fantasy leagues. But if he's out there in your fantasy leagues and there's a chance Cook doesn't play next week, like I said, Madison's a guy that's a perfect number 2 running back for next week and possibly for the remainder of the season if Cook would go down with a monster injury. The next running back I look to get on the wire this week, Samaje Perine of the Cincinnati Bengals. So right here, quick turnaround for the Bengals Thursday Night Football. And Joe Mixon, he left the ball game with a leg injury, hobbling off the field in the 4th quarter versus the New York Jets. But Samaje Perine, he looked dominant in the 9 carries. He had 47 yards and 2 catches, 14 yards and a touchdown. So if Mixon's going to miss multiple games here, Perine would be the top pickup, obviously, if Montgomery will return and Alexander Madison. So right here, all 3 of these guys I've mentioned on this list so far here. It depends on injuries, but right now, Joe Mixon, he looks like a guy who's got the better chance of missing next week than a Montgomery and obviously a Dalvin Cook, because his ball game's Thursday night. Ryan, he's a physical running back, not a great receiver out of the backfield here, but he did show the 2 catches for 14 yards. So right here, Perine available in over 90% of fantasy leagues here. And if word does come out in the next day or 2 here that Mixon could be out this game here in Week 4, or even be out multiple weeks, he's a monster ad as Perine, and he would be a solid number 2 running back for your fantasy roster. The next running back, Smith of the Arizona Cardinals. So Benjamin, I know he didn't have a good ball game in this one, but he was on the field a decent amount, and they're using him in different formations over there, with him and James Conner on the field at the same time at times over here for this Arizona Cardinal team. So Benjamin, so far in the first 3 games this season, Week 1 versus Kansas City, 4 carries, 28 yards, 3 catches, 33 yards. Week 2 at the Raiders, 8 carries, 31 yards, 3 catches, 20 yards. In Week 3 versus the Rams, a down game, 5 carries, 16 yards, 2 catches, 7 yards. So right now, he's a gadget guy, kind of. He's a passing downs guy, and he's got a pretty decent matchup Week 4 at the Carolina Panthers. But right now, James Conner was healthy. He played in this ball game, and obviously in Week 3, this was the worst ball game for Benjamin. Right now, Benjamin, he's available in a lot of fantasy leagues at over 85% of leagues, and he's a guy we're giving ad in deeper leagues too, because if James Conner does go down, he's a guy that's going to get a bigger role, him and Darrell Williams. But right now, he looked decent as Conner in this ball game, and he was healthy and finished the game. And the 5th and final running back I look to get off the wire this week's J.D. McKissic of the Washington Commanders. So McKissic, I mentioned him as an ad last week, And in for PPR leagues, he's been fine as a flex option. Week 1 versus Jacksonville, 3 carries, 8 yards, 3 catches, 20 yards, a 2-point conversion. Week 2 with Detroit, 7 catches, 54 yards. And week 3 versus Philly, 3 carries, 8 yards, 6 catches, 32 yards. So right here, it's been tough sledding for the running back position in terms of rushing the football and running through the tackles for this Washington Commander team. They got blown out in the Week 3 ball game, 24-8. And there's a lot of ball games where they're going to have to be playing catch-up this season. And J.D. McKissic will get a lot of garbage time or a lot of dump-off plays this season. So right here, Week 4 at Dallas, it could be a similar type of game where this Cowboy team could shut down the run. And Carson Wentz in this offense will just have to throw the football. So right here, McKissic available in over 70% of fantasy leagues. And he's a guy I definitely would go out there and get. And I've recommended him now 2 out of the first few weeks of the season. So that's a few running backs I look to get on the wire here for Week 4 of the fantasy football season.